16 cents an hour. That's what Department of Labor records show one Goodwill franchise paid a disabled worker for hanging clothes legally in America. Right now, somewhere in this country, that's still allowed. Everything on the rack in front of you showed up for free, no purchase order, no factory invoice, no container ship, just a bag at the back door. And yet the building pays commercial rent, runs a card reader, and in at least one case just went public on the New York Stock Exchange. Free inventory should mean the whole thing prints money. It doesn't work that way. And the reason it doesn't is the same reason this business barely resembles the one you think you're shopping in. Start with the number nobody says out loud. A normal clothing retailer spends more than half of every dollar it earns just buying what it's about to sell. Cost of goods. That single line decides whether most retailers live or die. A thrift store's version of that line is close to zero. On paper, that should make its margins the envy of the industry. It doesn't because gross margin was never the hard part of retail. Getting rid of the inventory was. And a thrift store receives more inventory, faster, in worse condition, with less predictability than almost any retailer on earth. Here's what that looks like from the inside. A donation lands in a garbage bag, not a shipping container with a manifest. Nobody has told the store what's in it. A real person, paid an actual wage, has about 4 seconds to make a call, sellable or not. Stained goes in the bin. Torn goes in the bin. Anything electrical gets tested first. Anything that looks valuable gets pulled aside for a separate operation will come back too. Everything else gets a price written by feel, no barcode, no sales history, no way to know what a stranger will pay for a navy blazer with no size tag. That labor, repeated across tens of thousands of items a week, is the actual cost of free inventory. The clothes cost nothing. The judgment calls cost everything. Not every donation gets treated the same way, and the split matters more than most shoppers assume. Industry estimates put the number that ever reaches a sales floor at full retail price at somewhere around 20 to 30%. The rest doesn't disappear. It moves down a ladder, and every rung is cheaper and faster to clear than the one above it. Rung 1 is the floor itself, a real price tag, a real shot at a real customer. Miss that window, and most chains rotate the item out using color-coded tags, a new color marked down every week, until it's occupying square footage worth more empty than full. Rung 2 is the outlet. If you've never seen one, picture a warehouse of blue bins the size of small boats, clothing unsorted and unpriced, sold by the pound instead of the item, often $1 or to £1. Regulars show up at opening wearing gloves because bins get swapped roughly every 20 to 30 minutes. Miss the window. The item's gone. Rung 3 is the bale. What doesn't move at the outlet gets compressed into 1,000-pound blocks and sold wholesale to textile brokers, the same way a farmer sells wheat by the ton, not the loaf. At that point, it stops being a sweater in any meaningful sense. It's a commodity, priced by weight, headed for export. The U.S. ships roughly 700,000 tons of used clothing overseas every year, according to EPA-based estimates, bound for second-hand markets across Eastern Europe, Central America, and West Africa. Rung 4 is where the story stops being about margins. Markets like Cantamonto and Accra, Ghana take in millions of garments a week from the global north. Traders there buy bales sight unseen at a fixed price with no way to inspect what's inside before they pay. A meaningful share of what arrives is too damaged or too cheap to have any second life at all. Every earlier stage in this chain already got paid. The trader is the one left holding merchandise that was garbage before it ever left an American donation bin. So follow one item all the way through. Given away for free. Triaged in a back room. Sold at retail, or it fails that test and gets sold by the pound, or it fails that test too and gets baled, shipped, and resold overseas to someone who never got to look inside. For sales, minimum, on a single item. The person who originally owned it was paid nothing at any point in the chain. That's not an accident. That's the business model, working exactly as designed. One more lever before we get to who's actually accountable for any of this. Remember the obviously valuable pile from the sorting room. The vintage tee, the barely worn bag, the coat with the right label. That's not charity. That's triage running the other direction. Big chains route those items into dedicated resale storefronts and boutique sections built specifically to capture the small slice of donations worth more than the pound rate. That's the part of the business with real margin, real pricing research, real retail behavior. It exists precisely because everything else in the building is priced by volume, not value, which raises the obvious question, who's actually accountable for any of it? Start with the uncomfortable line item. Section 14C of the Fair Labor Standards Act lets certified employers pay workers with disabilities below minimum wage calculated against a productivity rate instead of the clock. Goodwill has held these certificates for decades. Department of Labor filings from 2011 show Pennsylvania locations paying workers 22, 38, and 41 cents an hour. A Fort Worth franchise paid some workers as little as 4 cents. That same year, combined CEO pay across roughly 150 Goodwill franchises topped $30 million. As of January 2025, 16 states have banned the practice outright, and federal regulators proposed phasing it out nationwide, a proposal the Department of Labor formally withdrew in July 2025. The certificates remain legal. Today, the nonprofit accountability problem runs deeper than one wage rule. A charity thrift brand isn't one company with a CEO you can look up. It's usually a loose federation of independently governed regional organizations sharing a name and a logo and very little else. Separate boards, separate budgets, separate executive pay. Funded almost entirely by register sales instead of grants, that structure answers to almost no one. The shopper assumes they're supporting a cause. The donor assumes the bag goes straight to someone in need. Neither one is reading the filings. Then there's the operator that doesn't bother pretending. Savers Value Village runs the largest for-profit thrift chain in North America and doesn't take donations directly. It buys them in bulk from nonprofit partners. Cents per pound, flat fee per item, regardless of whether anything sells. It prices the same goods at ordinary retail. The gap between the two is the company. In its most recent fiscal year, Savers posted $1.68 billion in revenue, up from $1.54 billion the year before. It went public on the NYSE in July 2023 at $18 a share. Ares Management, the private equity firm that owned it going in, still holds roughly 3/4 of the company today. Nothing charitable in any of that, and for years. The marketing came close enough to the line that regulators noticed. In 2015, the company settled with Minnesota's Attorney General over how it represented its charitable impact, paying $1.8 million to the charities it worked with. Washington State went further, arguing the advertising created a false impression that shopping there directly funded good causes, when in reality none of the money from individual purchases went to charity, only the flat donation rate. That case reached the Washington Supreme Court. The company won, unanimously, on First Amendment grounds. Read that outcome for what it says, looking like a charity, right up to the legal line, is protected speech. So where does the real money live? Not in the sweater. In 3 stacked layers on top of one free raw material. The curated layer, the good finds, rooted to specialty resale, which is where that vintage jacket you hope to spot on the rack actually went. The retail layer, the one shoppers see, really just the first and most fragile shot at selling anything. And underneath both, the layer that makes the whole model close to unbreakable, wholesale by weight, where a broker buys volume at a set price no matter what's inside. A normal retailer that misjudges demand eats the loss. A thrift operation just sells the miss by the pound. There's a floor under every mistake. That changes who the actual customer is. The person browsing the rails on a Saturday feels like the center of this business. They're not. They're the most visible rung on a four-rung ladder, and the business survives fine without them because a broker 3 rungs down will buy the weight regardless. The one person this model genuinely cannot function without is standing in the parking lot with 4 bags, waiting on a tax receipt, saying thank you on the way out. You were never the customer of that store. You were its supplier. And you were the only one in the entire chain who worked for free. If that changes how you look at your next donation run, that's the whole point. Another everyday business is quietly making its money the exact same way, and almost nobody's clocked it. That's what this channel keeps digging into. See you in the next one.